2007, that figure has doubled to nearly 3 trillion miles per year. That means doubling greenhouse gas emissions, air pollution, oil production, and more wars are fought over oil. Everything costs more, and inflation chases the proverbial rabbit. Is there a prison for our minds? Today, human beings suffer from more and more depression than at any other time in our history. According to the World Health Organization, heart disease is the #1 cause of death in the world, killing over 7.2 million people per year. In the United States of America, there were 1.4 billion prescriptions for antidepressants. Millions of those were for children under the age of 18. The numbers of severely depressed human beings goes far beyond those that are taking medication for it. 1 million people worldwide commit suicide every year. What is the answer to our total freedom? Is the answer hidden deep inside of the mystical experience? Is the answer to our enlightenment available now? Over 2000 BC, Judaism begins with the covenant between God and Abraham. Its lineage goes back even farther to the time of Genesis, of Adam and Eve, the birth of humanity. Before 2200 BC, Krishna, the Hindu incarnation of God, taught the way to total freedom from suffering and the attainment of a non-dual reality filled with inner bliss and inner realization. By 1500 to 1200 BC, the Hindu Vedic teachings began, giving the foundations for perpetual liberation through the deep science of mantra, sound, and the true nature of the mind and God. In the 6th century BC, Pythagoras taught a lineage of an awakening of intelligence, enlightenment that influenced many of the great mystics and scholars, from Plato to Socrates, creating the foundations of the true democratic and evolved political processes. In the 6th century BC, Gautama the Buddha's first words upon attaining nirvana while sitting under the Bodhi tree in deep meditation was, "There is suffering." He then taught an eightfold path that leads to the cessation and transcendence of suffering by attaining enlightenment. For those who attain it, they become Buddhas, Tathagatas, or fully enlightened ones. In the Common Era, Jesus and his mother Mary taught a way to end violence, attain the kingdom of heaven within, and wipe every tear from every eye. For his saints, such as Saint Teresa of Avila, Bernadette of Lourdes, Francis of Assisi, Dante Alighieri, Emanuel Swedenborg, there was the attainment of enlightenment. For his faithful followers, there is the bountiful new paradise earth. Today, global destruction of the ecology, war, disease, death, oppression, depression, and enlightenment all exist at the same time. Humanity now faces a critical juncture. What if it can attain enlightenment individually, one light bulb at a time? What if humanity can survive all of the challenges it faces and live in an age of sustainability? What if humanity, with the awakening of deeper intelligence and enlightenment, can advance science to the point that it can enter an interstellar community and meet with other civilizations? What have we lost by turning our backs away from the deep mystical teachings, practices, and experience inside of all of our own religions? Can it help guide us to an awakening of intelligence, to end war, depression, disease, and help guide us on our journey towards a new civilization? Considering global warming, sewage pollution, and the inconvenient truth of Al Gore, the proof that we may be heading towards a mass extinction event through either global warming causing an ice age, or 2, global warming causing massive virus outbreaks, what is the Tibetan Buddhist view on an exodus from a planet? If we destroy this planet and we are psychologically and ecologically involved in its destruction, where do 6.5 billion souls go from Tibet? Where do they find a new home if they seek reincarnation? And
well, first of all, from the point of view of the Buddhists, the planet is not destroyed. Even though we're trashing it, we will come to our senses, and they predict, and it will not be destroyed. We may go through more hardships and so on, but a total ice age or a total meltdown or a nuclear holocaust is not going to happen according to their predictions. That doesn't mean that's so, but I mean that's what they think. So that's point one. I always thought, ever since the Death Star incident in Star Wars, where Obi-Wan and Luke are flying somewhere, and then there's a shudder and a disturbance in the Force, because the Death Star has actually destroyed a particular planet with many billions of souls on it, and Obi-Wan shudders, you know. But I always thought that in the Buddhist cosmology, there's billions and trillions and countless numbers of planets with humanoid beings on them. We've been on many other planets many times.
Oh, wow.
We will be on many other planets many other times. And we will, therefore, all the souls, if a whole planet was destroyed in a supernova Death Star, the souls would be reborn other places. And we ourselves have been through many big bangs and big crunches, all beings, because life is beginningless from the point of view of the Buddhists. And so there's always more places to live. However, the sort of archangels, if you could say, the bodhisattvas, you know, the compassionate beings who are making a huge effort, although they didn't create the world, they don't create it, they don't control people absolutely. On a relative sense, they're quite powerful in their trying to arrange circumstances for living beings to be optimal for them to wake up and become themselves bodhisattvas and become enlightened. So from a Buddhist point of view, they will do a lot in their power, and they do have considerable power to prevent us from destroying ourselves. In other words, the way we behave as human beings, our governments and everything, and our chauvinistic, especially male chauvinistic habits, having had nuclear weapons now for over 50 years, that we haven't killed each other totally or had a nuclear holocaust is itself a miracle. And the Tibetan Buddhists would argue this miracle is not really a miracle, it is the miraculous activity of enlightened angelic beings, but not an they don't believe in an omnipotent deity that absolutely controls everything, because then you'd have to blame the bad situation on that deity, and they think that's illogical, that's very irrational. But that there are these powerful angelic forces seeing to it that we continue to learn our lessons, that we use this theater of life to evolve in the optimal, you know, most rapid way toward our own enlightenment. That is what the Mahayana Buddhists would believe.
You know, when you read mystical experiences, it appears it's far out there, it's so difficult to achieve it somewhere in a distant world. But you know, when it comes to you as an experience, it is so real, it's so real. It's such a simple and practical thing to be. There is one rule for those who go into deep experiences of samadhi, that they are not supposed to share it with others. You know the reason? Because the student then starts imagining that type of state or start craving for that state. And that craving for a particular experience becomes an impediment in getting that experience.
There are many stories of enlightenment. You see yourself on flowers. You hear your voice on trickling sound or chirping birds or winds, or you see yourself outside of you. That is moment of enlightenment. You don't belong to this body and mind.
We have all the major religions in the world share their near-death experiences with it at some point or another, including atheists, including people with no religion. It's true, even atheists, even people who absolutely profess no belief in God whatsoever can have near-death experiences. And when atheists have near-death experiences, they're just like the near-death experiences of everybody else. They're positive, blissful, have the same sequence of elements. Of course, for atheists, after they have this type of near-death experience, it's almost impossible for them to continue to be atheists. Time and time again, we've had people that will say, hey, I was an atheist, I had this near-death experience, and wow, I had to change my beliefs. Now I understand there is a higher power, I understand there is a God, I understand there's an afterlife, I understand there's much, much more to my consciousness than I ever realized, and it's almost impossible for someone to continue to cling to those atheist beliefs after they've had such a profound experience as a near-death experience.
And I was sitting in my old house in Redondo Beach on the couch, just sort of by myself, not doing much of anything, just sort of thinking. And I looked up towards our stairs, and I saw, it was the most kind of amazing thing I'd ever seen, it would be as if there was a dimensional warp or something open. There was like a sparkling. And then out of that sparkling appeared my father. But he was in his absolute prime. He passed away when he was 79. In this vision, he was maybe 35 to 38, something like that, and smiling and grinning. And I could see, I sort of went with the experience because I was so shocked that I saw him. I could see through him, and yet it was there. So it was obviously an apparition of some sort. I mean, it was his spirit, yet he was very real, and I could certainly make out that it was him, and had the whole, his whole body actually appeared. And as he kind of floated down the stairs towards me, I'm in shock, and I go, "Dad?" And he goes, "You were right, you big stinker." And I laughed, and what that was in relationship to is over the years we'd had an ongoing debate about life after death, and my own experience was, and my belief was, that there is more to life and that the spirit certainly survives the shell of the body. And he was very agnostic at best, if not an atheist, and said, "No, I don't believe any of it. When you're dead, you're dead." And he comes over and he basically sits down at the other end of the couch, and I'm, going with this, not believing that it's actually happening, and yet it's happening. And we then, in the next half hour or so, time kind of stopped. I don't really know how long it was, but it seemed like, not enough time, and yet I was able to tell him all of my hurts and things that we didn't experience and how come you did certain things, and he was able to tell me that he was sorry and how much he had loved me, and it was the kind of intimacy and exchange, I might get tears in my eyes again, where he opened in a way that he could never do when we were alive. We never had this kind of an experience. And right at the key moment where I really felt a sense of love and companionship with him that I'd never felt, he started to fade away. He started to sort of move up into the air. And I go, "Dad," and I was crying. I said, "Dad, don't go, don't go." And he continued to move up, and I'm watching him go up, and that same kind of a sparkling thing happened like I saw at the top of the stairs originally. And as he was kind of fading away and moving towards the ceiling, he said, "Michael, remember, I'm only a thought away. I'm only a thought away." And then the last one sort of faded out. He goes, "I'm only a thought away." And he went out through the ceiling, and then the sparkling stopped.
And here we are as a biological system, relatively tiny, on a relatively tiny planet, in a relatively tiny solar system, in a relatively tiny galaxy, compared to the scope of the universe that we can see through telescopes. And yet, this mind that exists in our individual consciousnesses, in each and every one of us, this mind has the capability to envision things as tiny as superstrings and go from the micro, up through atoms and molecules and cells and organs and people and planets and solar systems and universes. And literally we could imagine ourselves holding ourselves, envisioning the consciousness of everything. And the conclusion I come to is that our minds are bigger than the entire universe. Our minds, our consciousness has the capability to go from the small to the all. And that capability exists in every one of us. The question is, will we tap into it? Will we develop the skills to be able to go from the micro to the macro? Will we develop the skills to be able to integrate all this information? And that's where developing the tools of consciousness becomes part of our great challenge.
And he had been saving them he had met Kirpal Singh in India 25 years earlier when Kirpal Singh gave these to him. So apparently this food is blessed and it holds some example of, there's a spiritual energy put into this food, or any article, I believe, and they call it Parshad. So the idea is if you eat this stuff, you'll get a spiritual experience that somewhat, I don't even know the intention. I guess the intention is to encourage you to believe that there's a spiritual dimension and this is some benefit to you. So he offers me these grains, this one grain of rice that he's been saving for 25 years. And we're sitting in his kitchen in Santa Cruz, California. And it was rather instantaneous. He and I were both seated at the same table, and it seemed as no, it didn't seem. My consciousness moved beyond my body, and it went beyond the kitchen we were in, and it went beyond the house we were in, and it was very strange because this part of me that I identify as myself, like right here in this chair, literally seemed to be go beyond this, like this vase over here. Like I really felt like I was that vase. Here's my arm. That's definitely me, but now it was like that vase was me too. And then beyond that, and I was becoming the walls in the building, and then I was becoming the buildings beyond the building. And it was really frightening. It was very frightening. And it kept going. And it went through the whole city. And I kind of had the idea of what was in the city. Like, I mean, this sounds insane. But anyway, it went beyond the city, it went beyond the world, and then I felt as though I was going into space. And my consciousness was expanding through space. Now, this sounds crazy, of course, but nevertheless, I got the idea of inhabited worlds in space, what they were like, and this idea of the volume and vastness of space that I'd never been able to comprehend before this time. And it was absolutely terrifying. And it just kept going. So this kept happening. We were expanding out into space for, I guess, maybe 40 minutes. And we're clutched onto the corner of the kitchen table. We're seated at the table, and our arms are wrapped around this table, holding on for dear life. I don't know what that means, but and tears are dripping from our eyes to the table. Both he and I. And I'm saying, "Are you experiencing the same thing?" He's over there nodding. He can't really speak. And we are just going, "Please, we can't take it anymore. Please turn this off." And we're believing Kirpal Singh is a real entity. I mean, you got the idea. I mean, not the idea. It was clear that Kirpal Singh was responsible for this. It was though he was an entity who was right there taking you on this journey. And you couldn't see him. There was just the presence of him was very real. And so anyway, essentially we were just begging for him to turn it off because we thought we were going to die. I mean, that was the idea. It's just you can't survive this kind of experience. Have some trouble.
Okay, so I think we need to preface that we were going through a transformational change at that point, and we had started seeing flashes of light. The experience that I had had in my living room where I was reading the magazine, and we had a two-way fireplace. I was in one living room, and the fireplace also was two-way into the other living room. And all the lights were off in the house except for my reading lamp, and it was late at night. And I was flipping through the magazine, and through this time, I had was asking to see the angels. I always had a lot of faith and prayer, and was doing healings, but I wanted to see them. And so one evening, I was flipping through, just thinking about the kids and when I was going to get them, and then I just felt this presence. And I slowly looked over to my shoulder through the fireplace, and this amazing flash of blue-white light, like lightning bolts, or like about 50 light bulbs went off in the other living room and just flashed through the entire house. And from that point on, the kids have started seeing the flashes of light. And then we moved to Scottsdale, and that's when they were experiencing the balls of light, and we started having more visions of angels. So what color was the ball of light?
Mostly white with a splash of gold. But what's really strange about it is that if I would have something blocking my view, I'd usually get really irritated, but it was more calming than ever.
What would get irritated?
Like, I'd be watching TV, then Alex would go in front of the TV, and I'd sort of get mad, but it would sort of be, I'd look at maybe a chair or something, and the light would be in front of it, and I couldn't really see it, but it wouldn't bother me. It was calming.
Oh, so it irritated you if something got in front of the ball?
No.
The ball got
No, he's saying normally if Alex got in front of the TV, that would irritate him, but the balls of white didn't irritate you.
Yeah.
Okay.
It made...
So they were very calming.
They were very centering.
They had a presence.
Very centering, he said.
Yeah.
You felt a presence with these balls of white.
Oh, yes.
How big were they? Describe with your hands.
Like that.
Wow.
That's big.
It's pretty big.
And they were gold and white light.
Yeah.
And do you believe other people could see these, or do you think you're seeing into the invisible where other people don't see?
I don't know. I mean, I know there are people more spiritual than me, like the monks, and maybe they see them, or I don't really know. I mean, I'm pretty sure that I'm seeing something invisible to the most human.
So, Alexander, why don't you tell about the bubbles of light that both you and Adam see, but you would see the bubbles all the time. She would always go to bed and say, I see the bubbles around me.
Wherever I look, and if I close my eyes and open them, I'll see like a bubble or a zigzag of different colors, red, blue, the rainbow colors, and if it's really dark, I'll see a ton of little bubbles like that big, and they'll be all over the place just floating around.
Wow! I'm really blown away. I want to see those bubbles. Actually, only one time in my life I saw bubbles, and that's when I was hypothermic.
Okay, first of all, let's talk about what do we mean by invisible, and then we'll address this to the question of apparitions and spirits and all other forms of, quote, invisible beings. What science has taught us, which I find to be utterly extraordinary, is that our visual experience, which is totally brilliant, only sees a tiny sliver of all the vibrations of photons that exist in the known universe. So if I look outdoors, for example, and I can see tens of thousands of rocks and tens of thousands of leaves and hundreds of thousands of hues of colors and shapes and sizes, it can fill my consciousness, my visual consciousness, with all these details. And yet all that complexity and all that experience is more than, I don't explain how tiny the sliver is. Let me give you an example of how little we see. If we imagine the size of the Empire State Building as reflecting all the known frequencies of light that exists in this room right now, and then we ask how much of those vibrations can we see with our naked eye? Okay? Do we see 50 stories, 10 stories worth of the vibration, 1 story of the vibration, 1 foot of the vibration? What science tells us is the amount that we see in our consciousness is smaller than the grain of sand. So what we are seeing with all this breadth is a grain of sand compared to the Empire State Building of vibration, of light. So most things that exist are, quote, invisible to us. Our senses are extraordinarily limited. Our normal senses are extraordinarily limited. But we can go beyond those senses when we develop certain higher forms of awareness and consciousness. We can also do it with science. In fact, what science can be thought of as the process of making the invisible visible. We take frequencies we cannot see, and then we transform them. We either increase them or decrease them and put them into the little grain of sand of the spectrum that we can see. And now all of a sudden we can see the invisible with technology. So once you become aware that most of what exists is invisible, and it's all light. It's all light. We're talking about just the vibrations of photons here. Then the idea that there could be apparitions, or there could be angels, or there could be any number of beings or processes that are not part of our everyday experience becomes extraordinarily plausible. We just have to then use our technology and apply it to these processes, these questions, these beings. And that's what's happening now in science. We're beginning to take this super sensitive technology, develop for other purposes, and we're applying it to these other realms.
But if I'm sleeping, I can go into like a different state of consciousness where I'll like wake up, but my body won't be awake, and I can see like people sitting on my bed. And it always depends on what state I'm in as well, or what types of energies I'm attracting to me. Now that I'm working on a clearer energy, I usually attract guides and things like that who can communicate to me through the night. Okay, so my aunt, actually it was about It happened when I was 19 years old. I'd been seeing like spirits on and off as a child, but never really taking it seriously. But when I was about 19 years old, my aunt had died probably 4 years before that, but I was going through a tough stage, and I was looking for a transition. And one night I was asleep, and my body was paralyzed, obviously, because your body goes into that state sometimes when you sleep. And then I must have just been drifting off, and it was like my astral body sat up out of my body, and I remember looking down and seeing my body down there. And then there was a lady sitting on my windowsill, and she was a lot younger, and I didn't communicate verbally to her, but it was a telepathic thing. I could tell that, you know, I was connecting with her thoughts and she was connecting with mine, and I said to her in my thoughts, "Who are you?" And as soon as I said that, I got a flash of my auntie when she was about 83 years old. I think that was the age when she died. And then I knew that it was her, so I started saying, you know, "Why are you here? What do you need to give me a message?" And she just started to telepathically tell me that everything's okay and you need to move to Sydney, which was across the other side of the country. And there had been a few thoughts coming into my mind about wanting to move and needing a transition because I felt really stuck. But because I was so young, it was really hard to make such a decision to move across country. So she kind of came to me and she guided me a little bit, and then I just laid back in my body, and I woke up the next morning and I remembered it all so vividly. And that sort of made me make that grounded decision, and then I left probably about 6 months later.
So how did it affect you to see someone, I mean, did it confirm for you that we live on, to see someone that was your own relative?
Yeah, definitely. And a lot of people are skeptic out there because maybe they haven't had the experience. And I think as a child, I had a lot of those types of experiences, but because older people and parents and things like that, it's not really the thing to believe, I kind of shut it out. But having a deep experience like that and seeing my auntie come to me and actually being able to come out of my body and for it to be so real just really reconfirmed it in my mind.
Yes, when I was little, when we first moved into Arizona, I put my hand down by a lizard and the lizard just crawled onto me. And I just like animals a lot, and I like to save their lives sometimes.
What do you think of Nua?
She's cute.
She's really happy with you. She looks all blissed out. So Alex, you just saw a man in our house?
Yep, outside the bathroom window.
Right out, he was outside the house?
Yeah.
Can you show me, walk with me and show me where...
Did he appear and disappear, or? No, I just saw him. He was, see that big bush right there?
Yeah.
The big giant, he was sitting right under it.
Under the tree?
Yeah.
Right to the right?
It was all the way up there.
All the way there. Wow. So you're drawing a picture of him that you just saw him? Okay, let's go look at your picture that you're going to draw. I'm getting goosebumps like crazy. Look at me. Come on, my goosebumps.
Oh, you are. I can go get some. I really want to.
I've got goosebumps.
Teacher, you draw feet.
I felt a very native Indian presence. The last time we were up in Sedona.
Is there a way for people, I mean, these invisible cities like Shambhala, I mean, again, when the mind is pure, do they actually see
Shambhala is not a city. Shambhala supposedly is a country with 96 million inhabitants.
Wow.
Near the North Pole, somewhere like in the North Pole area, surrounded by all kind of rows of ice mountains, and with a force field that covers it that makes it invisible. But it's a huge country, and they have 96 provinces, each one with 1 million citizens, and it's 96 capitals. The central one, Kalapa, is there. I mean, in the legend of Shambhala, that's what Shambhala is. Not like one city.
Right.
That's like a confusion. You know?
So
it's not in the Gobi and all that. It's a confusion. It's somewhere like in the north of Mongolia, therefore in the North Pole area.
Yeah,
no, Shambhala's up there in about 300-400 years. Apparently the veil is lifted and we see Shambhala. And then the Shambhalans kind of help us out and get us past our phase of militarism. And then the Dharma becomes very widespread for about 1,800 years, supposedly.
300 or 400 you said from now? That will
Yeah,
happen?
300 or 400 years from now.
From now, Shambhala will reveal itself.
Yeah.
That's
and then it interacts. You know, there's a little bit of a buffeting, a little bit of
that's incredible.
Bit of a scrap, and then like an Armageddon type of scrap. But then basically the whole planet goes toward peace, and there's a golden age of 1,800 years, they say. But I can't imagine that it would be only 1,800 years, but maybe. And there's a very golden age of people being very loving and developing wisdom, a lot of education, a lot of meditation, and a lot of spirituality, and way past violence, equality of the genders, you know, the sexes, male and female, no more male dominated, but also not female dominated, but equality. And a really wonderful era, they believe, will ensue at that time. And I'm always protesting with the Tibetans that I think their calculations are wrong, because I don't think the planet can last that long under the present stress of militarism and exploitation, and that it should they're hiding the true calculation, or the calculation
should be
off.
sooner.
And it should be sooner, I feel, but personally. But that's just my own, you know. They just laugh when I say that. Dalai Lama actually says that he doesn't believe in it at all. That he's not into prophecies. That people should live according to the practice that they can do right then and there. Shouldn't sit waiting for something to happen.
Right,
and that's what he likes to say. And in another sense, there's a few stray theories that actually Shambhala's already here, and it's a matter of turning your awareness. And then you just don't even notice all these morons running around shooting each other.
Well, essentially what happens is your spirit does, you find yourself cooking through some last edges of resistance. You find yourself becoming so present in this very moment. You're so inside of your body. You're so dealing with any edges of resistance that you might be feeling somewhere in your energy system. And by surrendering deeply into it, by going into it as opposed to skipping out and avoiding it in some way, by going right through the core of your last resistances, it's like suddenly you feel all of your energy almost like releasing and expanding. And you know, my experiences often have been through the third eye, where there's like last areas of resistance, and the energy just, you know, it kind of like it burns through there, and suddenly there's an expansion, and you realize that, oh my God, more of me is outside of my body than is in my body, yet you are simultaneously in your body. And you have the peculiar sensation of being in a place of singularity where there are no boundaries.
And I did my first 3-day intensive Buddhist retreat where you sit. We had, you know, all these people, like 20 or 30 people in our house, and my dad led this retreat, and you sat cross-legged, back straight, 1 hour at a time, 5-minute break, 1 hour at a time, 5-minute break. And by the end of the day, you're meditating 12 hours. I mean, I've climbed mountains, I have skied down, you know, 55-degree slopes, I've jumped off 30-foot cliffs, I planted trees for 22 years, and I'm telling you, there's nothing harder than sitting in this posture, cross-legged with, you know, the hands folded and the legs crossed, back straight, with not leaning against the wall, sitting for 12 hours a day. It is the hardest thing I've ever done. And it's not only physically challenging to hold that posture for so many hours a day, but it's mentally challenging just to stare into my mind and my thoughts and my emotions all day long with no distractions, no TV, no phones, very little food, and just doing that. And we did this for 3 days. On the second day of the retreat, I mean, my legs were shaking. I couldn't even sit properly. I mean, my legs were bent upwards and I was shaking. My eyes and my back was hurting. And all of a sudden, you know, after hours of boredom and just staring at this opaque nothingness and the breath and watching the breath and doing this technique called insight meditation, all of a sudden, in my belly, right down in here, there was this just cracking explosion of ecstasy. I mean, it was so bright. It happened so fast, and I just started bursting out laughing hysterically. And I would fight and try to stop, laughing, because there were all these people in the meditation room. And pretty soon I started laughing so hard I just had to leave. I had to get up and go outside. And when I walked outside, it was like I didn't even have a body anymore. I mean, I had the arms and the legs, and I could walk, but I was in this ethereal space. And I remember walking through this grassy field in the park in Vancouver, Canada, and I came upon these 3 weeping willow trees blowing in the wind. And when the wind blew through the trees, I was the tree. I was the wind caressing the tree. I could feel it, just like I can feel my face and my eyes and my skin. I could actually feel it. I was in this extended consciousness. And not only that, there was this supernatural ecstasy bathing the trees. And it just seemed to get deeper and deeper and deeper. I got so lost in these trees. And I remember these birds, these crows walking on the grass, and it tickled me when they walked on the grass, because they were walking on me. It's like I was that connected to the whole. And all of a sudden, this vast consciousness, this beautiful, peaceful ecstasy, it was not like an exhilarating kind of a high. It was this smooth ecstasy. All of a sudden I could hear what the Hindus call the sound of Om, the all-pervading sound of the universe. I could hear every plant, every tree, every blade of grass, every unique plant had its own sound. And the sound was very silent but very obvious in this consciousness. And all the sounds of all living things were blending into this symphony of the sound of Om. And I looked up, I remember looking up at the sun, and I was just in awe. I was like, oh my God, I can hear the sun. The sun was making this very high-pitched frequency sound combined with a very low frequency sound together. And it was also in the symphony of Om, and the sound of everything was merging. And I walked, and it just felt like I was made of pure consciousness. I was no longer the body.
In the 6th century BC, Pythagoras taught that a harmonic sound was produced from the motion of the celestial bodies. The sun, the planets, and the stars in the heavens were producing a sort of cosmic music as they pulse from within and travel along the vibrating strings of their orbits. Pythagoras actually experienced going beyond his physical boundaries with his consciousness and hearing what is now called the music of the spheres. He believed anyone who purified their senses could have this experience. Quote, "Such a one will perceive things invisible to others and will hear things inaudible by others." With this enlightenment and wisdom, Pythagoras gave birth to classical music and the intervallic system we use to write music today. He saw three phases of music: the musica humana, the music of the human being as the human instrument, the music instrumentalis, the music of the voice and musical instruments, and the musica mundana, the music of the cosmos. The human musical body and mind is an instrument which, if tuned and purified, could expand its awareness into the world and cosmic beyond.
I thought I was seeing my scuba diving bubbles. I thought I was seeing from the mask and from the tank. I thought I was seeing the bubbles, and they were beautiful. They were soap bubbles, and I was moving with these incredible bubbles, moving so fast, and as I was moving with these bubbles, I kept thinking, well, somebody's saving me. I'm being saved. And I moved with these bubbles, and I could see in front of me, I could see behind me, I could see on top of me, left of me, and the right of me. And all of a sudden I realized I couldn't see my body. I couldn't see my body. There was no body. I was a bubble. I must have been a bubble. I was a spirit. I was moving with these bubbles, and I was a light. And these lights were like diamonds, all sides. They were a kaleidoscope of colors, of beautiful soapy bubbles. And as we moved, as the speed quieted down, almost Tai Chi, it slowed down. Time stopped. It slowed down too. And there was no beginning and there was no end. I was in the now. And the now had a voice. The now had energy. The now was orgasmic in quality. It was brilliantly, orgasmically gorgeous, exploding. Voices of beauty, of grace, of love. Billions and billions of voices, and it sang, and I was singing. I was vibrating in this energy. I was vibrating, and I was singing my song. I was singing all the things that I had experienced in body that were beautiful. And as the energy passed through me and vibrated from me, like a tuning fork, I was singing my melody, and the melody was part of heaven's melody and part of heaven's light.
Asking what it feels like when I sing is actually, the one question that doesn't mean anything. Because the whole point of chanting, and I guess spiritual practice in general, is to engage yourself completely in the practice. There's no one there to be evaluating or thinking about it or saying, wow, this is really good, or this is bad, or I should try harder, or like that. You reach a certain point where you're given 100%. And at that point, there's nobody left. There's no part of you left to be noticing how it feels at the time.
Well, if we are exclusively contained in ourselves, that is total life, total value of your life. Your body and mind is yourself. But if you really achieve anatta, if you really see yourself outside of your body, you are released from this clumsy body and mind. That is a real achievement.
The human aura is our very own glowing, living energy field that extends beyond our physical boundaries. While invisible to most humans, it is the light extension of our soul. In rare cases of enlightened individuals, such as Krishna and Radha, Buddha, Kuan Yin, Jesus, Mary, and other enlightened beings or saints, it was said that you could actually see a huge luminous sphere, nimbus, or halo expanding beyond their head region. People were so affected by the divine presence of these masters that when coming in contact with their aura, enlightenment was transmitted through it, as they felt the presence of God. What about ordinary human beings? Do we have our own halo or aura? The human aura is comprised as a single large halo or sphere that extends beyond the human body. Its components are made up of 7 primary energy centers. The first, being the root or sex energy center, is symbolized by the color red and is located near the tailbone. Second is the life force connector, symbolized by the color orange and located just below the navel or belly button. The third is the doer or motivator energy center, symbolized by the color yellow and located just below the sternum or heart center. The fourth is our heart, symbolized by the color green. This is our love center. Fifth is our throat, symbolized by the color blue. This is our communication center. The sixth energy center is symbolized by the color violet. Located in the middle of our forehead, it is the inner eye or inner vision center. The seventh energy center is located at the crown of the head and is symbolized by white. It is our universal connector center. All of these energy centers correspond to our physiological organs and our vital and subtle energies. While scientific studies of human consciousness in the past have been limited to brain wave mapping with EEGs and brain scanning with magnetic resonance imaging, Kirlian photography was the first breakthrough to demonstrate that we could actually take a photograph of the human aura. Amazing colors could be seen radiating from human fingertips, leaves, and other organic life forms, proving that all living things have energy fields or auras. Today, the world's first 3D human aura imaging camera and computer technology has emerged as a revolution in the field of consciousness studies. Internationally distinguished physicist Professor Konstantin Korotkov from St. Petersburg Tech University in Russia developed a way to not only see the aura of the human organism, plants, and organic life forms, but to also see the real detailed data and information contained in the aura's energy field. This represents an incredible and exciting breakthrough. This revolutionary camera and computer software captures the biophotons, or aura, radiating off of all 10 fingertips.
And each finger rests on the electrode.
It then transposes the actual information of our aura into a 3D model composite of the entire human body. Our biophotons transmit our consciousness and information, just like voices and TV pictures are transmitted on radio and microwaves. The information in our aura can actually be captured and stored in a computer. Now we can actually measure the amplitude, balance, and integration of radiant energy radiating from all 7 human energy centers. It shows detailed data where a person is radiant or weak in their spiritual, emotional, and physical bodies.
This one's interesting. It has like a spiral coming
See
off.
the finger?
Oh.
It's a...
Krishna Madappa, an East Indian American research partner of Dr. Korotkov, conducted an experiment designed by David Sarita with 5 meditators. The purpose of these experiments was to scientifically demonstrate how meditation could possibly change and benefit an individual's state of consciousness and raise their vibration. Krishna also decided to see if the group could affect change in the vibration, structure, coherence, and organization of water placed in a glass in front of them.
Why does it take, thousands of lifetimes to become as awake as the Buddha?
That's an interesting question. Because we have so many ways to hide, so many layers to peel, and society doesn't want us to be free, because if we are free, we cannot be controlled. So society does everything to stop the process of freedom in humans.
A baseline was established by taking energy readings of the watcher before the meditation began. The baseline begins at 10 with parameters of 10 to 1. This number represents coherency, structure, and organization of the watcher's energy, 10 being the least and 1 being the highest measurable potential, as in perfect oneness. In the first test, the group participated in 45 minutes of vigorous breathing meditation that is designed to activate each of the 7 energy centers in the body and soul. The group ended with 15 minutes of silent meditation.
The Sufi breathing to me is just taking it to it's a different type of meditation. You're hyperventilating, basically you're breathing in and out, panting like a dog very, very quickly. So you're super enriching the bloodstream of the body with oxygen. So my head, at least what I felt, was I got a little bit dizzy, but it was very much, I opened up in so many ways to the point to where I began to feel like I was in a different space. And in my experience, towards the end of the Sufi breathing, it was about 45 minutes out, I had a vision that I became an eagle and that I was flying into the sun, and I could literally feel the rays of the sun, the yellow rays of the sun, impacting my body. And I was flying along. I could feel the wind under my wings. It was really different. I had no idea I'd ever expect anything like this or experience anything like this. But it was really, really good. And then after we did the Sufi breathing exercise, then I was tested on the GDB machine, and it showed a completely different result. My chakras had become more in line. They became larger, especially my heart chakra. I noticed that the heart chakra circle became very, very large on the computer as we viewed that.
Dr. Krishna Madappa took several readings of each of the 5 participants' energy centers and their total aura field.
We are also going to get a baseline reading of the water in a simple principle, as we have done with the electrophoton capture device. And we will do this in principle, taking 15 frames per second for a total of 10 seconds. So we will take 150 frames 5 times. Before and then after the Sufi meditation, we will again look at a similar set, and all this will be dynamical images of the water, at which point in time, once we open it up in the program called the Scientific Laboratory Program, then we can see clearly influence how the water's area, entropy, fractality, intensity all has contributed before and after.
I met an Undermima when I was very young. And then I was away from her for a long, long time. And then I saw her again when she was a little older. And she was completely merged with everything. She was, how can I, it's, words can't describe who she was, who she is.
Yeah, Mukti. That's her. That's not her baseline.
This is Muktima after Sufi breathing.
Yeah.
And you can
look at her
that,
heart chakra.
Yeah, you can. On one hand, for Muktima, it is really strong when she is in active mode, which is why you also relish dancing, the African dance. That dynamical mode for you is very present.
He then took several readings of the water's energy. Amazing results ensued. The average energy coherency, structure, and organization of the water improved by 20% in just 1 hour of meditation, registering from a baseline of 10 and progressing to 8. In the second meditation, the group chanted the word Om for 30 minutes. This meditation is designed to bring harmony to the human body and mind. After this meditation, Krishna again took several readings of everyone's auras and the water's energy.
What will happen now, we must make sure that while we have Nula's nose there and...
We cover
Oh,
it.
look.
If not, we can just do her tail.
Her tail.
Okay, one more time then, okay?
Okay.
One more time. Well, give me the skirt.
Okay.
Nula is right.
This was a study to show, is it possible to send and quantify, measure energy of healing, loving energy, sending. So if we sent loving energy to another being who is not directly in front of you, but in another space, will they receive it? And if they receive it, how does it show?
Wow.
That was the purpose, and this was done with a team of researchers in Slovenia. So here we see that you've got the person who is sending energy. This is the right side, is sending of energy, and on this side is the receiving of energy. So from the right side, when you talk about, because the emotional heart is on the right, it is sending, so there is a little burst, and of course these bursts are captured.
And it's separate from the body. It's leaving, this burst is leaving the body.
Indeed.
Oh, that's amazing.
And the receiver is receiving it. And look at the shape of that too.
How far away are they physically from each other during the experiment?
2 buildings.
Two buildings?
2 buildings.
So this burst of energy traveled 2 buildings and went to...
this person who was the receiver.
And this is documented scientifically as biophoton emissions.
Yes, yes.
Honey, you got big chakras.
You got some big chakras.
Look at the size of those things.
That's a new way. Yeah, I like your chakras. Nice. They are huge.
Look at her blue. Let me just zoom in on her blue inner eye chakra. Now look at it's like taking up the whole head.
What?
This is after Om.
Okay.
Yeah. So she even told me this. The gentle meditations have a more, but your inner eye chakra, your third chakra, and your crown are very, and your throat, and your heart.
Look at the strength that has gained from here up.
In the Om.
In the Om. And you had a vision. Yeah. You said,
she did. That's
the tall shaft going out and opening into the clouds.
Yeah. I had this amazing vision in my third eye, which I felt both there and above my head, a very powerful energy, and it was quite a unique experience I've never experienced before. It was really exciting when I was able to actually see it on the aura machine, that my chakras that I could feel were being most activated showed on the machine as well. I mean, I was also very emotional and I couldn't help but cry, and my heart chakra all the way through to my crown chakra was very enlarged through that experience.
The average energy coherency, structure, and organization of the water had maintained a level of 8. The third meditation was a 2-hour sitting meditation. Each meditator pursued their own form of insight or sitting meditation. This is a very difficult practice.
Near the end, I mean, my body was in so much pain. My legs hurt so bad I wanted to just move, but something allowed me just to relax even further into the pain rather than trying to escape it. And I got to this point where I opened my eyes and the sunlight coming through the windows and you know, just gracing the walls, I saw and I felt in my heart that God was in the sunlight itself. It wasn't, God wasn't, you know, there wasn't this spiritual light in the room. There was just sunlight, but the sunlight, I was so aware that the sunlight touched me so deeply. I was moved to the most incredible emotions in my heart chakra, and tears and goosebumps came for hours afterward, just in waves. I mean, it was such a deep experience to see God was in the sunlight itself.
After 2 hours of meditation, Krishna took several readings of everyone's auras and the water's energy.
What we are looking at is a dynamical image of photons and electrons cascading onto this suspended droplet.
The water's energy went from a baseline of 10 to 5.5, which means it went nearly halfway to its total potential. This was astounding. David Sarita explains.
The idea that my consciousness, that our consciousness as a group, that we affected a glass of water and we transformed its energy, its coherency and its structure, and we caused it to progress halfway to its total potential, 1 being the highest value, 10 being the lowest, 1 being the closest we can get to absolute oneness, is amazing. How did we do it? How did our brains and our state of consciousness cause the water to transform? How did it actually occur? Well, if we look at the idea that we are not just a particle, an organism, that we have this aura, this energy field. As this field extends beyond the physical boundaries, it's exchanging information with everything around it. In fact, I don't believe this is just occurring with water. Water is the easiest to see how consciousness is affecting reality, because the hydrogen and the oxygen atoms in H2O are actually the simplest structures and they're the easiest to see these effects. We're probably affecting the wood, the walls, in fact, each other, the planet even, and even beyond the planet. We're affecting everything with our consciousness. So
imagine for a moment if a hurricane was coming in the future. But now, as people, instead of what we're doing with the weather forecasts, which we're amplifying the fear and we're looking at all the blowing of the winds and all the torment and so on. Imagine instead we had millions or billions of people simultaneously engaged in an organized, synchronized, guided imagery over the media of sending loving intentions and calming intentions to a storm, or even was redirecting it to a safer environment, would we find that the storm was diminished? Would we find that the storm might be moved? Well, we'll never discover it unless we look for it. If we don't ask the questions and we don't try it, we'll never know whether it matters or not.
The question is, how is this actually occurring? We have to look at quantum modeling of the atom in smaller to see the answer. And the answer, as we look at it, was first discovered by a physicist named Walter Schempp, who in the 1990s found that atoms all around us, in our bodies and in the air mass and the space, are actually exchanging information with each other, having a dialogue. So the key is, how is this information propagated through the space-time medium? How is this occurring? Atoms are talking to each other and exchanging information all the time. And the way that it actually works is like this. If we look at the diameter of an electron spinning around the proton in a hydrogen atom, what physicists discovered is the electrons jump shells or wavelengths. They change wavelengths, which means they change diameter. What Niels Bohr has discovered is that when electrons jump into shorter diameters, they go into a higher frequency orbit, and when they do that, the atom radiates off some of its energy in the form of a light wave, in the form of electromagnetism. And then when electrons go back to a longer wavelength, they jump back out to a greater diameter, the atom is actually receiving electromagnetism. And this has been known, since the early 1900s. What Walter Schempp discovered is, in this process of sending out energy in the form of electromagnetism and receiving energy in the form of electromagnetism, that these transmissions and receptions were not blank, meaning he discovered they had intelligent information encoded in them. Which means that just like we talk on the radio and we tag the human voice onto a radio wave, which travels at the speed of light, and that we send pictures and voices on microwaves, which travel at the speed of light, which is television, that the atom was doing the same thing. That atoms that live in this giant, enormous, universal field of consciousness, these atoms are actually talking to each other on a regular basis. And what happens is, what Schempp discovered, and he proved this scientifically, is that when the atom is sending out a light wave, it has information and data actually tagged on to the light wave. And then when it receives a light wave, it actually is receiving not just a light wave, but actual information and data is recorded on the light wave. Well, Walter Schempp's intelligent atom shows how communication can happen in less than a second over a small sphere of distance such as the Earth, and within minutes inside the solar system. It cannot explain how communication between 2 points can happen instantaneously regardless of distance in the universe, such as between galaxies millions of light years apart. But Einstein's discovery of spooky action at a distance demonstrates how consciousness can travel between 2 points instantaneously. This identifies a field that is able to send conscious information not only faster than light, but instantaneously over any distance. Einstein was spooked by it because no theory in physics could explain it, not even his, but they could verify that it was actually happening.
Two items are entangled when they have shared the space, become part of a system together. Most frequently it's described in an atomic scale as let's say 2 electrons in near the same space. They can't be exactly the same, so one way they're different is to have what people refer to as spin, one opposite to the other. That allows them to share the space. And this shared system is called entangled. These 2 items, elements, which could be 2 people, are entangled with each other if they share qualities of the universe in their space. And if you fall in love with somebody, you are entangled with that person. If you belong to a group that gets together and has deep, stimulating discussions, you become entangled in such a way that all of you share some aspect of the others. In any case, this kind of entanglement even though we haven't been able to demonstrate it in strong terms in macroscopic cases like two people. It's real, demonstrable, and a function of atomic systems, and we're gradually moving toward demonstrating in laboratory experiments that it can happen at larger scale systems. It doesn't seem there should be any limit on that, so people undoubtedly can be entangled with each other.
When scientists took a mother and baby rabbit, separating them over a great distance, they hooked both of their brains up to EEGs and atomic clocks to measure the event. They pinpricked the baby rabbit and the mother felt it instantaneously, not at the speed of light, which is 186,282 miles per second, but they felt it instantaneously. When Alain Aspect, the French physicist, did the same experiment by separating electron-anti-electron pairs over great distances, he found when stimulating the properties of one of the pairs, the other over a great distance would respond instantaneously. How did this happen? What conscious field is there that is beyond light speed communication and observation?
My friend Dean Radin, for example, believed that entanglement is not just for atoms, that we can have entanglement at bigger scales and ultimately at macroscopic scales, and suggests that when we are communicating in what appears to be an impossible way, using telepathy or some kind of psychic connection, that can be described and maybe accurately using the terms of entanglement.
Okay. Yes, I truly 100% believe that everyone is psychic. I think that some people have an easier time bringing out their abilities once they know the techniques and how to control them. And it really, more so than a matter of having the ability, because again, we all have it. It's more a matter of, are people disciplined enough to practice the techniques? Are they courageous enough to see what is coming in, to let themselves see the information and then to communicate it? I think some people are better suited to reading people, and when I say reading, I mean picking up information about anything from their past to present to a little bit of their future. So I think that some people are better suited to reading people, whereas other psychics are better suited to picking up information about, say, remote locations or lost objects or world events. It's just like any other skill. Some people, say, with musical talent are good at reading music. Others are good at improvising and then getting into the different styles of music. And it's the same thing with your psychic abilities. Another comparison here is that anybody has the ability to at least bang out some notes on a piano. And then there's obviously prodigies from the time that they're born. And it's really the same thing with your psychic abilities. And I'm just blown away that both with myself, that I could have lived to almost the age of 29, and there's people who die, millions of people who die without ever really realizing the extent of their abilities. And I think that it's just so important that, for one, we get over this idea that there's only a few gifted people out there with these abilities. That's completely not true. Most people have them.
One of the amazing features of entanglement, and probably one of the reasons that it's so hard for many people to comprehend or believe in, is that it really goes all the way down or all the way back. So in a strong sense, the Big Bang, if that's the way the universe started, was an entangled state, and all of whatever developed after that still is entangled. This implies, even if it's not true in complete detail, the model suggests that we are entangled with each other even at huge distances. Coming down to earth, so to speak, I think it means without much question that there is a little bit of entanglement present in the relationships of everybody on the planet. So it shouldn't be very surprising when we discover that a big event in the world, like the tragedy of 9/11 causes very, very large numbers of people to think about the same kind of thing, increase their entanglement, and result in a measure on our random event system, which we haven't talked about in detail yet, but we probably should.
Is there a God consciousness field? It's remarkable if we consider the Bible book of Genesis, in the first and second verses, that God is actually creating the universe and the earth by moving God's Spirit over the face of water. If a small group of human brains can affect the structure of water, scientifically demonstrated, then perhaps we can understand how God, the overall consciousness of the universe, created the universe and the earth and the planets the same way, just on a grander scale. But if we are affecting water and everything around us all the time with our consciousness, what will happen when we become a mature and singular civilization? What kind of power will we possess then?
We may be inadvertently affecting all kinds of events, from weather through growth, through literally how people are behaving. If you have 500 million people having a hatred for another group of people, that summated intention and energy, if you follow just where our research is going, our lab and other labs, leads us to the conclusion that we are going to be having these synergistic effects, that we're all interconnected through our consciousness and our energy. And so therefore, we need to become conscious of this, and then we need to be able to transform our consciousness so we can take more responsibility for the effects that we're having on everything else in our environment.
One time you said to me, there is no universe outside this mind. This mind is the universe, and I really love it.
Yeah, this is very realistic thing, huh? Very practical thing. Universe or mind is real life, our life.
Quantum physicists are now seeing that the mind and the universe, the observer and the observed are the same. They affect each other. They're in a constant relationship.
There's a distinction between saying, where can all this information be stored, versus where can all this information be processed. Okay.
Yeah, right.
In terms of the storage question, what quantum physics tells us, and particularly when you integrate that with systems theory, what you therefore realize is that you can store an infinite amount of information in an infinitely small space. And you can think about this, if you imagine, for example, that we're out in space, and we're much tinier than a pinhead. Okay? And there's light coming from all directions, from all these distant galaxies, which contains information about billions and billions of stars, right? And all this information is crisscrossing through the universe. So everything's coming in all directions. It's all crisscrossing, all at the same time. And if you're in a tiny little spot, if you had spherical consciousness or spherical vision, you could be seeing the light coming from here, and the light coming from here, and the light coming from here, and the light coming, and all of it's crisscrossing. And the amazing thing is, all of that's going on all of the time, and none of it's getting distorted. In fact, photons literally can cross one another, and they may summate or they may cancel. We call it cancel out. They appear to summate or cancel, but after they've, quote, crossed each other, they go on as if nothing had happened. And if that wasn't the case, when we looked up at the sky at night, we would see mush, because all the photons would be interacting with all the other photons, and they would be just creating a complex, quote, mess. So instead, the universe appears to be designed to be able to have all this information from all these directions, constantly mixing in every part of space simultaneously, and none of it gets mixed up. So if you think about that power, forgetting about how that happens, let's just say that it does happen. That's why you and I can look up at the sky at night, and our little pupils are this big. We're seeing this gigantic vastness. All that star information is going into your pupil, it's going into my pupil, it's going on simultaneously. So all that holistic information is simultaneously present in every single spot. We take that idea, which is a fact, forgetting about how it works. And then what you do is you combine with the idea of a system. And a system is two or more things that are connected, and they're sending feedback, circulating information and energy back and forth. And through the interaction, the parts come together and the whole becomes, quote, greater than the sum of its parts. Hydrogen and oxygen come together, they're two gases, they have feedback, they circulate energy and information, and what happens? We get a liquid called water, which has all the unique properties of waterness. Now, what's common among every system, whether it's an electron and a proton in an atom, or whether it's two molecules coming together, or whether it's two strands of DNA, or two cells, be it in the heart of the brain, or two people, or two planets, or two galaxies, it doesn't matter. If the components are sharing information and energy, and it's circulating, then what happens is that there is a storage process that takes place, and this storage process is also an evolving one. The take-home message, the way that this first came to me when I was a professor at Yale many years ago, is what goes around and stays around evolves around. Information that doesn't all disappear. Not only is it preserved, but it could potentially grow because it can be influenced by the other things around it. Once you recognize that idea, then you realize that not only does everything at every level have, quote, memory, I call this systemic memory, but this memory is in a state of constant evolution. In fact, a prerequisite for learning itself is feedback. And we know that's the case. I mean, we know in daily life we want to learn to, for example, shoot a basket or learn to play a musical instrument. We have to get feedback about whether we're making the right notes or whether we're getting the baskets in the ball. The feedback is what provides us with a corrective process. It's called negative feedback or positive feedback. Now, it turns out that feedback operates at every level, from the tiniest micro level to the most gigantic macro level, and every level in between. So you take the infinite nature of the storage of information in the vacuum of space with photons, and now you add systems operating with feedback loops at every single level, and all of a sudden you realize what we call a neural network of our brain, which makes our brain's capability for processing all this information. Imagine now that each of our individual brains are part of a much bigger brain, which happens to be on the Earth, and the Earth is part of a planetary brain, which becomes part of a solar system brain, that then becomes part of a galactic brain. And what I mean by brain here is a network of circulating feedback loops. Then what you realize is, at every level, you get this process of assimilation of ever more complex information. And if that boggles the mind, well, too bad. We just have to expand our minds to be able to see this.
So it's interesting to see that we have both Democrat and Republican presidents involved in different aspects of this Department of Peace movement that would actually be a U.S. Department of Peace. So actually this current bill that's in Congress right now, H.R. 808, was written and first introduced by Congressman Dennis Kucinich from Ohio in July 11th, 2001, which to me is very important to remember the date because it was exactly 2 months before 9/11. And the legislation was written as a proactive, solution-oriented new department, tiny new department that would be at the table, sitting at the table with the president and all the departments of the different department heads, to actually be another tool for the president to decide if we have no other options, then perhaps we would have to go to war. But if we did have other options, a lot of those options would come from the Secretary of Peace. And so Congressman Kucinich introduced this bill in July of 2001. I heard about it in the newspaper. I wrote him a fan letter, and I said, "Dear Congressman Kucinich, thank you for introducing this legislation, which is incredible legislation. We were a country at peace, July 11th, 2001. We were fairly peaceful around the world. And I said, you know, you and I are both from Cleveland. We're both raised Catholic. We're both short, and we're both vegetarian, although he's vegan. So I said, we have a lot in common. We both love peace. So he wrote me back a very nice letter thanking me for my interest. And then it wasn't until Marianne Williamson, who is now a friend of mine, had an email list in March of 2003, so about a year and a half later, Marianne invited anybody that would like to go to Washington to learn about this Department of Peace legislation, to learn how to go into our Senate and congressional offices on the Hill in Washington, and to have intelligent conversations with our elected representatives about creating a sister department, a new department, which would be this Department of Peace. And so I went to Washington with, there were 6 of us from Arizona, joined 200 people. So that was 4 years ago, so it was the United States working on creating a Department of Peace. And now here we are 4 years later in May of 2007 with 28 countries now around the world working to create departments of peace, with 50,000 grassroots volunteers around the country and the world that are networking with all kinds of groups, educating people about what the Department of Peace legislation is all about.
'40s, people have wondered, you know, why now? Why now? And of course, the first answer people came upon was that, well, now we have the atomic bomb.
When we set off the first atomic bomb, there was such energy released that probably created ripples throughout our solar system, perhaps throughout the galaxy. And other advanced races out there kind of did a double take and went, oh my God, the kids have found the matches.
It's true that it wasn't long after the nuclear blasts in the late 1940s that the first witness reports of UFOs began.
I think it was from outer space, but friendly.
According to the theory, these UFOs were alien craft who had arrived as an advanced guard. They were soon making contact with our rulers and negotiating terms. And if the theory is to be believed, an international conspiracy then began to hide any evidence of this contact. It's a cover-up which is still in full swing, or so some believe. Meet Peter Gersten, an all-American criminal lawyer. When he's not suing people and doing all the other things lawyers do, he's taking on the US government. And that's because ever since he was a boy, Gersten's been fascinated by UFOs. Some people would just go out and buy a toy ray gun, but not Gersten. Instead, he has spent much of his career trying to prove that the American government has been hiding its extensive knowledge of aliens and alien contact.
I was the first and only attorney ever to bring any lawsuits against the U.S. government for UFO-related documents that actually made it into court.
His dogged persistence and knowledge of the American Freedom of Information laws eventually led to the release of hundreds of previously unseen documents.
I must have brought about 10 lawsuits. Even when they release documents, they've always withheld something within those documents. This affidavit is a perfect example. Half the affidavit is blacked out. If UFOs do not pose a threat, if UFOs do not represent an advanced technology, then why is this all deleted?
Why indeed? He says these documents reveal the American government's obsession with the UFO phenomenon, which began during the 1940s and 50s. They reveal the existence of government committees which were initially set up to investigate UFOs. But all along, the existence of these organisations was denied, until finally they were all closed down, one by one. Despite the fact that governments kept telling the public there was no such thing as aliens, the aliens themselves didn't seem to be getting the message. Because according to Gersten, they just kept flying their spaceships through our skies. One case which has been cited by many as proof of a vast conspiracy conveniently happened in Gersten's backyard in Phoenix, Arizona.
Unidentified flying objects over the valley. A triangular-shaped object. What was in the sky last night?
The Phoenix lights lasted anywhere from an hour and a half to 2 hours, and there's never been a major investigation to determine what that was.
What is it?
I don't know. About 10:30 at night, there were about 7 lights that had a distinct formation that just stayed over Phoenix in a triangular pattern and then left. And it's amazing to me that something can appear so brazenly over a major metropolitan area and not be fully investigated.
The story gripped the local media, But the official response was some kind of military flares.
They had a number of leftover flares on the aircraft, and each aircraft had to get rid of them because the rules prohibit the aircraft from landing with flares on board.
Gersten returned to the courtroom, but even he couldn't prize an explanation out of the authorities.
The Freedom of Information Act is totally impotent. All they have to do is a reasonable search. And they say they did a reasonable search, we couldn't find anything, and the court goes along with that.
So, is Gersten onto something, or does he just need to get out more? To really get to the bottom of what the government might be hiding, we need an insider. One who's seen some alien evidence with their own eyes.
If you're involved in something like this, who do you talk to? You can't tell your family. You can't tell your closest friend.
Now, the most convincing evidence that aliens have landed and those in power know about it would naturally be the sight of, well, an alien hanging out with the rich and powerful, being driven around in a limousine, or being photographed with celebrities. Unfortunately, the absence of anything like this means believers had to rely on something less convincing, hearsay, and there's certainly been plenty of that.
I glanced up and there were 3 flying saucers at an altitude of 350 feet.
No one disagrees that in the 1940s there were lots of unidentified flying object sightings. Even the skeptics agree there have been a lot of these sightings, but they put that down to paranoia.
What's this all about? What's everybody running from? It's the end of everything. What do you mean?
There was, after all, something called the Cold War going on. When the West and the Soviets confronted each other with secret weapons, spy planes, and various other military thingamajigs. The skeptics put UFO reports down to all of this. Nick Pope, for example, conducted an official British investigation into UFO claims, and let's just say he's not convinced.
Nothing so far tends to give rise to any suggestion that extraterrestrials have visited the Earth. But it's often suggested that there's a huge conspiracy here, and that the government's somehow covering up the truth about UFOs. Well, having headed the UFO project for 4 years, I can categorically say there's no truth in that whatsoever.
For believers, though, the more governments deny, the deeper the cover-up must be. And instead they turn to people who have claimed to have seen for themselves evidence of an alien plot. Some of these witnesses say they even saw evidence of an elaborate government cover-up. You know, things like alien craft, soldiers picking over it, and aliens. Here's someone who says he saw exactly that. Clifford Stone spent over 20 years in the American Army. For most of that time, he had a desk job, but that's not to say nothing interesting happened to him. Because according to Stone, he was drafted into a top-secret operation. Its purpose? To retrieve downed Soviet satellites.
I was involved in the activities that would recover crashes, debris thereof. Those operations were known as Project Moondust and Operation Bluefly. Those 2 projects dealt with 2 things: the recovery of objects of unknown origin or objects that survived re-entry into the Earth's atmosphere.
Most of the recoveries were routine. But then in 1969, says Stone, his team were asked to investigate something that was very weird indeed.
During that time, we got a call, and they stated that they needed us to put some people together because they had a plane or something that went down not too far from where we were at. When we got there, a person that I would later always call the Colonel, he was there, and he came up and he told me, he says, "Specialist, I need you to go ahead, take your Geiger counter, and I want you to take Geiger counter readings and call them back to us." Well, I was asking, well, what is it? And he went ahead and said, It's some type of Soviet spacecraft that crashed. Says now if you get there and you see anything unusual, you need to keep in mind that the Soviets put monkeys, just like we do, in their craft. And as a result of that, if you see any bodies, don't worry about it. It will be monkeys. This was nothing that I had ever seen. I knew it wasn't our craft. I knew it wasn't the Soviet craft. As soon as I got to the place where I could look down, I could see where there was a little kidney-shaped door that opened on the side, and I saw one of the creatures lying out there. I went ahead and told him I needed an officer. I needed an officer to come up there, that this wasn't right. I also said this is no damn monkey.
Ever since he left the army, Stone says he's been trying to get the American government to admit to what he says he saw. The Defense Department, though, are still refusing to corroborate his story. Whatever the truth, he does seem to believe passionately in what he's saying. But it's worth remembering that people claim to have seen an awful lot of strange things. Take, for example, the family in Slovakia in 1990 who claimed to have been visited by the Virgin Mary. Or the hundreds of worshippers at a Hindu temple in the UK who swore they saw a statue drinking milk. And in Michigan, dozens of folks said they'd seen weird demonic children with melons for heads. Belief. It's a funny thing. But if by some chance Clifford Stone is telling the truth, it raises an obvious question. Why, oh why, would governments hide their encounters with aliens? What have they got to gain? Some people think the answer lies in technology, and we're not talking ringtones. Richard Dolan is a writer who has been investigating government conspiracies for over 10 years.
Whether you believe that the UFOs are ours or alien, there's certainly something that's showing non-fossil fuel related transport. You know, I've spoken to hundreds of people who've said, yeah, this object stopped over my head and took off like a bullet, silently. Well, this is not 100-octane petroleum here. This is something far beyond. So the question is, what is it?
So if alien craft are using some advanced technology we don't know about, what might it be? We were hoping you'd ask. Tom Vallone is one of a small band of scientists working on various theories that could explain how alien craft travel, if indeed they do, intergalactically.
These flying saucers travel thousands of miles in seconds.
Vallone believes aliens can travel light years through space because they've come up with a source of energy that never runs out. Which means it's a lot cheaper and more reliable than the stuff you'd find on your local forecourt. Cool.
We couldn't possibly imagine that UFOs would be burning rocket fuel. You can't even get to Mars today with rocket fuel. So we have to accept the fact that if there are vehicles that can travel interplanetary and perhaps interstellar, they have to use an onboard fuel source that is converting ambient energy or have such a concentrated form of energy that it can survive over light years of travel.
Right. And how might they do that?
The current UFO research points to many different technologies that can be used for free energy and what we call anti-gravity propulsion.
Solving the problem of anti-gravity has flummoxed the greatest minds in physics, but Tom has spent many months locked in his garden shed trying to figure it out. He's even built a little replica UFO.
One UFO contactee reported a disc the size of the UFO that had magnets on the outer edge. And so here we actually have a disc that has magnets on the outer edge that perhaps may be powered by some means that involve permanent magnets or some arrangement of permanent magnets.
According to Vallone, the separate halves of UFOs might contra-rotate to create energy that can be harnessed to power the spaceship. The beauty of this energy is that it comes out of nowhere. You don't need to do anything so last century as actually burn fuel. In fact, it's like you're creating it out of thin air. You can see why Tom is still puzzling over it, can't you? According to the alien conspiracy theory, when the extraterrestrials brought this energy to Earth, a lot of very powerful humans got very annoyed. Some people, like journalist Jim Mars, think those in power didn't want such limitless energy to become widely available. The spoil sports. Please don't take my sun and shine away.
Think of the ramifications. If a whole new energy technology was to come along that would just overnight replace gas and oil. The oil industry would collapse, the Middle East would collapse, the whole car industry would collapse. You know, I mean, it would be a severe upheaval in our society.
In a world economy dominated by oil, Mars says this new kind of new energy would undermine powerful business interests.
See, these folks, they don't care if we know there's aliens out there. What they care about is if we know there's aliens, then we know there's alternative technologies, and this could upset their monopolies.
But Mars goes even further. He says the government and the powers that be started covering all this up even before the 1940s.
We're on the way to Aurora, Texas, where legend has it that a spaceship crashed in 1897. This is the Texas Historical Commission, the state marker that I was telling you about. And it's the oldest known graves here, early 1860s. This site's also well known because of the legend that a spaceship crashed nearby in 1897, and the pilot killed in the crash was buried here. And the only caveat, of course, is the word legend. Okay, right up here under this oak tree is where the grave site is, but there's no marker, so I guess I'm one of the last people in the world to know precisely where the grave is. And now that you know, I guess you'll have to be killed. It was right here. Someone stole the marker back in 1973. We figured the government did it. And I have reason to believe that's true because not too long back I met a woman who grew up around here by this cemetery, and she said that she had encountered federal officers in this cemetery, and I said, oh yeah, that was probably back in 73, and she said, no, this is back in the 50s when I was a little girl.
Jim's experience in Texas led him, he says, to compare notes with others across America, and he began to detect a pattern to the cover-ups. Ah, you were wondering how long it would take to get to the men in black? Well, here they come.
If someone has a UFO-connected experience, then sometimes they are visited by strange men in black suits who, number one, ask them, what exactly did you experience? And number two, tell them, if you know what's good for you, you won't talk about this.
Now, let's just get this story right. According to Mars and many others, there's been a worldwide conspiracy to cover up contact with aliens because governments don't want to reveal the technology they learned from these extraterrestrials. But does that make any sense? Wouldn't the governments or the oil companies just license this advanced technology and sell it? And anyway, if they wanted to cover up contact with aliens, you'd think they'd remember to take away that sign. But since all the people involved are long dead, there's no way we can ever know for sure if it really happened. What we really need to do is meet one of these men in black for ourselves. Well, guess what? We found someone who said he worked for a top-secret military organisation. And his job was to run part of the official cover-up. Funnily enough, he wanted to remain anonymous.
I was trained by the Central Intelligence Agency and the Defense Intelligence Agency. During my DIA career, I investigated unidentified flying object sightings throughout the southwestern part of the United States. We did conduct counterintelligence operations against people that were close to obtaining the truth about classified programs. Some might call the operations disinformation, but whatever you call it, it was a legitimate form of putting the wrong people away from the classified programs.
This alleged secret agent wouldn't tell us exactly why the military wanted to hide their contact with aliens, although there were dark hints of a military-alien alliance, and he was happy to admit he'd met many an alien in his time.
They're about 4 foot, and they have the classical large eyes. They come from a planet with apparently a very bright sun, so they have double eyelids, have no ears per se, just have an opening on each side of their head, same as nose, mouth, no teeth, simple internal organs, heart and lungs, basically the same organ, simple digestive system. I'm not going to discuss that. There's a lot of information I wish I didn't know.
So there you go, a secret agent who positively wanted to be interviewed. He refused to give us any evidence to back up his claims, and we couldn't find any either. But if he did what he says he did, how does he sleep at night?
I don't have any problem with my conscience, no. Everything I did in a government service, the disinformation in this area, was all legitimate. It's sanctioned operations that I was told to do. I did my job, and I did it well.
These guys, they're unofficial. They don't exist within the official framework of our society. These agents charged with studying UFO phenomena and so forth. They're outside.
Okay, maybe Agent X is telling the truth, and he's a man in black. If so, we've stumbled on a scoop. So when did the cover-up begin? Maybe aliens didn't first land in the 1940s, or even in the 1890s. Because maybe, just maybe, aliens have been here for a long time, and when we say a long time, we mean a very long time. They've been running the world since the year dot, and they've kept it very quiet indeed.
People want to laugh and say it's impossible. Well, please be my guest, I don't care. But if you're interested in what's happening in the world, this is a phenomenon that needs looking at, because there's something to look at.
So, we've had top-secret government committees investigating the presence of UFOs in our skies. We've had secret military operations to retrieve downed spaceships and their alien pilots. We've had sinister government agents terrorizing the public. But in terms of a conspiracy, this is just the tip of the alien iceberg.
I woke up, and mere inches in front of my face, there he was. And I was really freaked out.
This is a very rare opportunity we're looking at. Implants are rare.
Because according to some, the aliens have not only landed, they're actually running the world. What? Yes. Here's a man who believes it. David Icke. Icke regularly speaks to packed-out audiences, spooking them out with the full implications of his theory.
The power that these guys I'm going to talk about in detail today use to manipulate, control, and slaughter many of us, increasingly so, is only the power we give away every single day.
He hasn't always been a full-time conspiracy theorist. In fact, he started as a soccer player and sports commentator on the BBC.
Kenny Dalglish of Liverpool and Scotland.
But all along, something was troubling him.
When I was a kid, I had this feeling, I couldn't put words to it, I had this feeling I had something to do. And when I started being quite good at football and went into professional football, I thought that must be what it is. But there was something missing. I couldn't put words to it. I felt unfulfilled.
Ike looked at the world and there was something wrong with it. At first he couldn't work out what it was, but something under the surface was amiss. International poverty? Global warming? The capitalist system? No, something deeper still. He became convinced that everything that was wrong with the world could be explained by one overarching idea: that a small, ruthless elite had taken control of our planet. It's claimed it is made up of a highly secretive group of families who exercise absolute control over world politics and economics. Its name? The Illuminati.
Well, the name Illuminati comes from the phrase the illuminated ones, which is extremely appropriate because they are illuminated into knowledge that they keep from the rest of the people.
Ike was convinced that these families were no ordinary power-crazed tyrannical elite. Oh no. There was just one small detail which distinguished them from the rest of us.
What I've done is ask the next question, which is, where did the Illuminati come from, and who controls them? And you go back into thousands of years BC, and you start to pick up another common theme, which is of interbreeding between humans and a non-human race.
I am from another planet, outside your galaxy.
I'm sorry, I just don't understand.
Ike claims thousands of years ago aliens arrived on Earth and probably interbred with the leading families of ancient primitive societies, creating alien-human hybrids. These hybrids and their descendants control the planet and everything on it. And if that wasn't scary enough, Ike says that they live in disguise amongst us, they live for hundreds of years, and they eat human flesh. Nobody's perfect. And in case you've been wondering, their sacred symbol is the pyramid, which is why, according to Ike, it's no accident that pyramid-shaped buildings are found from Mexico and Peru to Egypt and ancient Babylon. And how do we know about these guys? Well, according to Ike, this most top secret of secret societies uses special codes to communicate, using their own sacred images of the pyramid.
On the dollar bill, you have an ancient Illuminati symbol, which symbolizes perfectly what I'm talking about. It's the pyramid structure, and at the top you've got the all-seeing eye, the capstone of the pyramid, the illuminated ones, illuminated into knowledge they keep from the rest of the population.
Now, quite why the most secretive beings on the planet use the least secretive place to communicate, no one seems to know. Such details haven't stopped David Icke selling thousands of books, although there has been criticism of his use of the word Illuminati. The same term was used in the past by right-wing extremists to describe a worldwide conspiracy run by Marxists, Freemasons and Jews, and some have claimed that he is just tapping into old extreme paranoias. So who are the alien-human hybrids, and how would we spot one if we saw it? Well, apparently they include George Bush, Tony Blair and even the Queen of England. And we thought she was just German. Apparently they are all descendants of the original alien hybrids.
What you have, in effect, is the Illuminati families being the genetic representatives on this planet of these serpent gods.
Serpents? Yes, the aliens who came down to Earth long, long ago didn't look like the Queen of England. In fact, they were serpent, lizardy sorts. And even when they interbred, the old reptile bit just wouldn't disappear.
Well, I think the answer to why reptiles is why not. It's just a form through which people express themselves, or entities, consciousness expresses themselves.
The Illuminati cover up their reptilian nature with a human disguise. But occasionally, though, the effort of hiding their slithery selves becomes too much, and the mask drops.
Let me see you as you really are.
People find it difficult to perceive of a two-legged reptilian entity with what we would call an intelligent mind. But I have talked to hundreds and hundreds of people all over the world. I've been to more than 40 countries researching this, who have told me the same basic recurring story of seeing people, often in positions of power, but not always, change from a human into a reptilian form and then go back again. Sometimes it's for a few seconds, sometimes it's for longer. Ike's theory has turned him into a superstar in the conspiracy world. But some more mainstream ufologists are skeptical about his theories.
Having worked in the fields of public relations and communication, I'm not sure that I'm going to win friends and influence people by calling the Queen Mother of England a 200-year-old reptilian cannibal.
Whatever the truth, there's no doubt that Ike has tapped into something which people have often felt, the sense that their lives and their society are not under their control. But it's arguable whether those fears are calmed by imagining the world is run by lizards. Ike's theory that lizards are in control has had one notable effect. Whereas 20 or 30 years ago, alien sightings tended to be all about little green men, alien sighting stories have now begun to change. Now lizard sightings are all the rage. Mona Kempka, for example, is a fan of Ike. She's read all his books. And rather coincidentally, she has also seen lizards. They come visiting.
My name is Mona Kempka. I'm 55 years old. I've been a psychiatric nurse for 30 years. I've lived alone for the last 10 years.
12 years ago, Mona had her first reptilian experience.
In 1994, a reptoid appeared in my living room. 6'3", thin waist, giant muscular legs. This being could kill 5 men with a swat. I was asleep because I worked the night shift. And I woke up, and mere inches in front of my face, there he was. And I was really freaked out. I stood up in my bed screaming. He appeared to me for 6 seconds, and I was standing up in my bed, screaming, then he vanished. And I just sat down in my bed, and I started laughing hysterically. It wasn't because I thought it was funny, I was just hysterical. I didn't know who to call. I thought even my own mother would not believe this, you know.
So what's going on? Has Mona seen a reptoid alien, or does she just think she has? Or did the books she read by Ike play their part?
I mean, I don't believe everything I read. I take it all in and try to make my own decisions. But David Icke's on the money. And I don't even know David Icke. I'm just telling you, I'm glad this man is gaining momentum in this country.
What would help convince the rest of us would be if Mona, or anyone, had found some physical evidence, say a bit of old lizard skin lying around. Sadly, there was none. But that doesn't mean to say that there isn't any physical evidence of aliens and their dastardly attempts to control the world. Well, not if you believe this man. He says he's found it.
We cannot make claims of some strange entity in the midst of the night, or in broad daylight in some cases, actually came and abducted you and did various things and so on, without there being physical evidence of those claims.
Daryl Sims' day job is as a private investigator in Texas. But he has another string to his bow. He spent the last few years working with people he says have been implanted with alien probes. Just a normal, everyday sort of guy, then.
Well, first of all, they're varied and very different. We found them in the eye, we found them in the feet, we found them as large as a walnut, an inch big, next to the heart of an abductee. We found them in all types of places deep inside the brain, some of them as big as into your thumb, and then disappear within a year. What they are, that's a good question. What they're for, that's a good question as well.
Sims says he has extracted many of these implants and even agreed to show us a film of him doing exactly that.
What you're actually seeing here is Patricia under hypnotic anesthesia. She has been given a series of suggestions. Each time she will see her move and relax even greater. She's getting ready for the surgical intervention that will take place, where the surgery will be done on the foot. Here they're making this incision. This is a very rare opportunity we're looking at. Implants are rare. The surgery has taken over an hour. They can't find the object that they found so easily on X-ray. Here he is bringing the object out in a T-shaped formation. What they found in the keratin was wrapped around these objects, and it was very hard, very durable. It showed no signs of inflammatory response. In other words, this object was not treated by the body of Patricia, as an example, in any way as if it were a foreign object.
Now, Daryl Sims has no medical background whatsoever, but he claims that the object that was removed from Patricia's body was designed to control her mind. Quite why they put it in her foot, though, is a whole different matter. But anyway, over to you, Daryl.
My thinking is that the side effects of these objects, it seems to us, based on preliminary findings, is that levels of serotonin, dopamine, neurotransmitters, in effect, have been altered in some of these abductees. Now, any neuropsychologist or neurophysiologist can tell you in a New York minute that anybody that controls your serotonin, dopamine, or potassium, anybody that controls these neurotransmitters, especially serotonin and dopamine, they own you. They own your emotions, and you basically belong to them.
Daryl didn't allow us to do any tests on the little implant, so we can't say for sure what it was. And why a secretive alien could have been so easily outwitted by a Texan private investigator is anybody's guess. What we do know is that Daryl isn't entirely objective.
I became aware of the alien entity in 1952 at age 3.5 in an abduction scenario. And then what really threw me into high gear into full-time investigations in this phenomena is my son got abducted at age 6. Then at that point, for me, I could live with my problems with the abductions. But when you come after my children, now it's personal.
Alien lizard gods feeding off our own mistrust and fear. Alien implants that control our minds. Powerful alien human hybrid families that run our world. Blimey. But one question keeps nagging. If some people are seeing aliens, why aren't we all? Perhaps the answer, unnervingly, lies in modern science.
People are starting to realise that the world is not just a little bit different to what they thought it was. It's actually nothing like they thought it was.
We've come a long way in our understanding of the UFO phenomenon, but we still don't have a definitive answer. In the 50s, the big question was, do they come from Mars or do they come from Venus? By the 90s and today, we're even more sophisticated, and the question today becomes, do they come from another dimension?
Most sceptical, rational people will never believe that aliens control us and our planet without some conclusive evidence. But what if it was impossible to come up with evidence? Because the way we see the world is itself flawed.
People ask me, understandably, if these reptilian and other entities exist, why don't we see them? Well, it's to do with frequency. For instance, if I turn this radio on, I can get a station. If I move the dial, suddenly I've got another radio station. Now, the one I've just moved from hasn't ceased to exist, ceased to broadcast. It's continuing to broadcast, but I'm not tuning into it anymore. And so what we are in this so-called physical reality is we're like radio sets that are tuned into a particular reality. These reptilian entities and others appear to have the knowledge of how to move between dimensions.
We are invisible, Adam Penner. You cannot see us.
That's very simply what's going on. It's not some great mystery. It's actually very, very simple.
According to David Icke, the aliens have mastered some new technology which allows them to move from our visible world to mysterious, invisible dimensions. Convenient. Oh yes. But why stop there? It's equally possible to claim that a whole host of weird stuff is hiding out in hidden dimensions. Ghosts, werewolves, Elvis, and they'd all be impossible to disprove. Surely this must rank as the weirdest alien cover-up theory of all. Well, not quite. Nick Bostrom is Professor of Philosophy at Oxford University, which means he's been doing an awful lot of thinking, the brain box that he is.
We know a lot about what's before our noses, but the big picture, people think they know, but they really don't. They just make it up.
And Bostrom has been making up some cool theories of his own, and one of them's about aliens and computers. Now, 40 years ago, Earth computers looked like this. Today, they look like this. A tiny laptop now has more power than the biggest computers used to have. And our computers keep getting more powerful and quicker. Bostrom thinks, though, that all this is Stone Age compared to what alien computers can do. In fact, their computers might be so advanced that he thinks we might all be living in them. Just like the Matrix.
So one of the things that a technologically mature civilization would have is enormous amounts of computing power. By using a millionth of its computing power for only 1 second, they can create a simulation of all human minds that have ever lived.
And according to Bostrom, maybe virtual reality simulations would be so convincing that we might actually be living in one. So could we all be trapped in an alien PlayStation?
We are almost certainly living in a computer simulation, meaning that all this world that we see around us, everything we experience and everything we do, takes place in a virtual simulated reality that is implemented and running on a computer built by some technologically extremely advanced civilization.
I have come to feel that we live in a kind of matrix-like world. The question is, how far does this simulation go?
I don't trust anything in this reality. I think it's an illusion. It's a holographic reality. It's a product of somebody's technology or something's technology. So anything is possible.
So there we go. For a century or more, people worried that aliens might leave their own planet and come and conquer ours. This fear spawned a series of elaborate conspiracy theories, some involving the military, some involving a government cover-up. It was even argued that the aliens had bred with humans and sent secret messages to each other. Now it turns out the effort of investigating all those conspiracies has been a total waste of time. For planet Earth and everything on it, and indeed everything in the whole of our reality, could be just a product of an alien computer game. They didn't need to travel here to take us over. They got us to travel to them. So smile, because somewhere in another galaxy, something is watching you. Imagine, just for a moment, that the world is ruled by a small group who control everything of importance. Governments, big business, and the media. It sounds somewhat unlikely, but now imagine that this all-powerful group comes from another planet, and our rulers are in league with them. Now, that sounds really, really unlikely, and yet plenty of apparently sane people are convinced that it's true.
They own you. They own your emotions, and you basically belong to them.
I think they would kill people, and that's on the record too.
If you can control someone's sense of reality, then the human collective mind is putty in your hands.
So, has someone been handing out space cakes? Or is this the biggest alien conspiracy of all? July the 16th, 1945, the day the atom bomb exploded. Everyone agrees that this was an historic day, but some people believe it was also the day an alien conspiracy to take over our planet began. You see, apparently this was an event which didn't just get noticed here on Earth. The shockwaves were felt across our galaxy and beyond.
Ever since the UFO phenomenon sort of exploded into public consciousness in the mid-late 1940s, people have wondered, you know, why now? Why now? And of course, the first answer people came upon was that, well, now we have the atomic bomb.
When we set off the first atomic bomb, there was such energy released that probably created ripples throughout our solar system, perhaps throughout the galaxy. And other advanced races out there kind of did a double take and went, oh my God, the kids have found the matches.
It's true that it wasn't long after the nuclear blasts in the late 1940s that the first witness reports of UFOs began.
I think it was from outer space, but friendly.
According to the theory, these UFOs were alien craft who had arrived as an advanced guard. They were soon making contact with our rulers and negotiating terms. And if the theory is to be believed, an international conspiracy then began to hide any evidence of this contact. It's a cover-up which is still in full swing, or so some believe. Meet Peter Gersten, an all-American criminal lawyer. When he's not suing people and doing all the other things lawyers do, he's taking on the US government. And that's because ever since he was a boy, Gersten's been fascinated by UFOs. Some people would just go out and buy a toy ray gun, but not Gersten. Instead, he has spent much of his career trying to prove that the American government has been hiding its extensive knowledge of aliens and alien contact.
I was the first and only attorney ever to bring any lawsuits against the U.S. government for UFO-related documents that actually made it into court.
His dogged persistence and knowledge of the American Freedom of Information laws eventually led to the release of hundreds of previously unseen documents.
I must have brought about 10 lawsuits. Even when they release documents, they've always withheld something within those documents. This affidavit is a perfect example. Half the affidavit is blacked out. If UFOs do not pose a threat, if UFOs do not represent an advanced technology, then why is this all deleted?
Why indeed? He says these documents reveal the American government's obsession with the UFO phenomenon, which began during the 1940s and 50s. They reveal the existence of government committees which were initially set up to investigate UFOs. But all along, the existence of these organisations was denied, until finally they were all closed down, one by one. Despite the fact that governments kept telling the public there was no such thing as aliens, the aliens themselves didn't seem to be getting the message. Because according to Gersten, they just kept flying their spaceships through our skies. One case, which has been cited by many as proof of a vast conspiracy, conveniently happened in Gersten's backyard in Phoenix, Arizona.
Unidentified flying objects over the valley. A triangular-shaped object.
What was in the sky last night?
The Phoenix lights lasted anywhere from an hour and a half to 2 hours, and there's never been a major investigation to determine what that was.
What is it?
I don't know.
About 10:30 at night, there were about 7 lights that had a distinct formation that just stayed over Phoenix in a triangular pattern and then left. And it's amazing to me that something can appear so brazenly over a major metropolitan area and not be fully investigated.
The story gripped the local media, but the official response was some kind of military flares.
They had a number of leftover flares on the aircraft, and each aircraft had to get rid of them because the rules prohibit the aircraft from landing with flares on board.
Gersten returned to the courtroom, but even he couldn't prize an explanation out of the authorities.
The Freedom of Information Act is totally impotent. All they have to do is a reasonable search. And they say they did a reasonable search, we couldn't find anything, and the court goes along with that.
So, is Gersten onto something, or does he just need to get out more? To really get to the bottom of what the government might be hiding, we need an insider. One who's seen some alien evidence with their own eyes.
If you're involved in something like this, who do you talk to? You can't tell your family. You can't tell your closest friend.
Now, the most convincing evidence that aliens have landed and those in power know about it would naturally be the sight of, well, an alien hanging out with the rich and powerful, being driven around in a limousine, or being photographed with celebrities. Unfortunately, the absence of anything like this means believers had to rely on something less convincing, hearsay, and there's certainly been plenty of that.
I glanced up and there were 3 flying saucers at an altitude of 350 feet.
No one disagrees that in the 1940s there were lots of unidentified flying object sightings. Even the skeptics agree there have been a lot of these sightings, but they put that down to paranoia.
What's this all about? What's everybody running from?
It's the end of everything.
What do you mean?
There was, after all, something called the Cold War going on. When the West and the Soviets confronted each other with secret weapons, spy planes, and various other military thingamajigs. The skeptics put UFO reports down to all of this. Nick Pope, for example, conducted an official British investigation into UFO claims, and let's just say he's not convinced.
Nothing so far tends to give rise to any suggestion that extraterrestrials have visited the Earth. But it's often suggested that there's a huge conspiracy here and that the government's somehow covering up the truth about UFOs. Well, having headed the UFO project for 4 years, I can categorically say there's no truth in that whatsoever.
For believers, though, the more governments deny, the deeper the cover-up must be. And instead they turn to people who have claimed to have seen for themselves evidence of an alien plot. Some of these witnesses say they even saw evidence of an elaborate government cover-up. You know, things like alien craft, soldiers picking over it, and aliens. Here's someone who says he saw exactly that. Clifford Stone spent over 20 years in the American Army. For most of that time, he had a desk job, but that's not to say nothing interesting happened to him. Because according to Stone, he was drafted into a top-secret operation. Its purpose? To retrieve downed Soviet satellites.
I was involved in the activities that would recover crashes, debris thereof. Those operations were known as Project Moondust and Operation Blue Flight. Those 2 projects dealt with 2 things: the recovery of objects of unknown origin or objects that survived re-entry into the Earth's atmosphere.
Most of the recoveries were routine. But then in 1969, says Stone, his team were asked to investigate something that was very weird indeed.
During that time, we got a call, and they stated that they needed us to put some people together because they had a plane or something that went down not too far from where we were at. When we got there, a person that I would later always call the colonel, he was there, and he came up and he told me, he says, specialist, I need you to go ahead, take your Geiger counter, and I want you to take Geiger counter readings and call them back to us. Well, I was asking, well, what is it? And he went ahead and said, it's some type of Soviet spacecraft that crashed. Says, now, if you get there and you see anything unusual, you need to keep in mind that the Soviets put monkeys, just like we do, in their craft. And as a result of that, if you see any bodies, don't worry about it. It will be monkeys. This was nothing that I had ever seen. I knew it wasn't our craft. I knew it wasn't the Soviet craft. As soon as I got to the place where I could look down, I could see where there was a little kidney-shaped door that opened on the side, and I saw one of the creatures lying out there. I went ahead and told him I needed an officer. I needed an officer to come up there, that this wasn't right. I also said, this is no damn monkey.
Ever since he left the army, Stone says he's been trying to get the American government to admit to what he says he saw. The Defense Department, though, are still refusing to corroborate his story. Whatever the truth, he does seem to believe passionately in what he's saying. But it's worth remembering that people claim to have seen an awful lot of strange things. Take, for example, the family in Slovakia in 1990 who claimed to have been visited by the Virgin Mary. Or the hundreds of worshippers at a Hindu temple in the UK who swore they saw a statue drinking milk. And in Michigan, dozens of folks said they'd seen weird demonic